Mother Knows Death presents External Exams with Nicole Angemi.
Hi everyone, welcome to this week's External Exam on Mother Knows Death. Since we started our podcast, we've had multiple stories in the news relating to skulls being found, and I'm always curious who works on these cases. When they're found, where does the skull go? Who determines who this person is that has either been missing or is a victim of a crime? And today we are going to talk to a forensic artist. Her name is Lisa Bailey, and she's coming out with a new book actually today called Clay and Bones. So welcome to the show, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here.
This is a thrill because I've been following you the moment I got on Instagram.
That's awesome because I've been a huge fan of your work as well. So I'm so glad we finally get to meet in person. It's great. So I like to start off my interviews just trying to get a basis of how people got into their field and what their life has been like their whole entire life, not just their career. So for me, people always think that I was they look at me and they think I have tattoos and I was some goth kid that just was obsessed with death and slept in a coffin or something. And I wasn't. When people find out that you work with human skulls for a living, do they ever ask you if you were obsessed with death when you were a kid and growing up?
Yeah, it's like, well, oh my God, how did you get that job? And were you wearing black all the time and all that goth? And I was the absolute opposite. I was always drawing as a kid and all that. I loved artwork. But I was painfully shy, like just everybody ignored me. I was painfully shy. So, and I didn't like anything, blood, guts, and gore, anything gross. So it was kind of surprising, like some of the things that I've seen in my life. And, but yeah, I was complete opposite. Anybody that knew me as a kid would be like, what? It's like, she ended up doing this. Like, I couldn't dissect the frog in science class. I have my partner.
It's really interesting though, because I'm starting to ask this question to funeral directors and other people that kind of work in a similar field to ours, and everyone says the same thing. They weren't into it. There was no indication that this is what they were going to do when they grew up. So you're saying that you were artistic when you were a kid. Were you also interested in science at all?
No, well, I hated science. I did everything to get.
No, this is great to hear because kids get frustrated in school because they don't understand science or they're not good at math, and then you look and see these adults became scientists when they got older. So it's a good story.
I was absolutely. Anytime I could make a science project into an art project, I would do that. So I was the kid who was building volcanoes with baking soda instead of writing a report about volcanoes. I was completely not interested in science. But one thing, if I can say this, I remember when I was about 13, 14, I used to watch all the police shows with my dad. And so on one of maybe it was Quincy, they had somebody doing a facial approximation. And I thought, that is so cool. I would love to do that. But this was the 70s and nobody knew how you would go about that. And then, or it'd be really cool to be a composite artist. I'd watch, I'm aging myself, Hawaii Five-0, things like that. So, so I thought that would be the coolest job on earth. But nobody knew. This was way before computers. And even if there had been computers there at that time, there's very little information about how to become a forensic artist. It's a very oddball niche field. So it's really kind of odd that all these years later, it's exactly what I ended up doing. I wasn't aiming for it. It was living my life, doing, joining the Navy, all those things that I guess we'll talk about. I ended up unwittingly being perfectly prepared to be a forensic artist at the FBI. When I saw the job posting, it was like, they had my resume. It was crazy. Yeah, it was crazy.
That's awesome. So let's first talk about the military because I want everyone to get an understanding of how you ended up at the FBI as a forensic artist. So you come from a family that is
Yes,
military,
yes,
correct? And so when you were growing up, was that just like, I'll be joining the military when I get older, or when did you decide you were going to join the military?
I figured when I was about 17, that's probably where I was going to go. There were 5 kids in our family, and college was just never talked about. Like it was like that was something the officers' kids went to college. Like my dad was a master sergeant. Wonderful guy, dad. I have the best father in the world. I have to have the best father. Anyway, so college just wasn't an option. So it was like there was nothing in Dover. I lived in, that's where the Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. If people have heard of that, that's where they bring the remains from overseas of soldiers. They have the morgue there at Dover Air Force Base. And there was really nothing there. So the military was really the best option to get out and get a job, be trained in something, get college benefits. And it was the best thing for me. I mean, I stopped being shy. I learned how to stand up for myself, because if you don't, you'll get mowed down. And obviously the military is male dominated, but it was the best thing for me. So best thing for me.
And your dad was in the
he was Air Force 26 years.
And what made you decide that you were going to go into the Navy?
So my dad was in the Air Force. My mother was in the Women's Army Air Corps in the 50s. My oldest brother and my sister were in the Air Force, and another brother was in the Marines. And I thought, well, I have to do the Navy so I can, round it out. And they honestly, and please take my age into account, I was 18. They had the cutest uniforms. So that was serious. I'm serious. That's what 18-year-olds think about. It's like, oh my God, it's cute uniforms. But yeah, it just appealed to me. Yeah.
So I'm not 100% familiar. I know I'll probably sound like an idiot to people that are in military families. I'm not familiar with how it works really. So you join the Navy, and while you're there, what are you doing as a job? Do they try to find something that you're good at, or they just give you any kind of task and you have to learn
you figure out what you want to be before you join. So you take a test, which is a general placement test, sort of an IQ, but so you get a general placement test. And then they take out this, big book. The recruiters are trying to get you to join something that they need. Like they tried to talk me into going to nukes, and I was like, I don't do math. I can't do nukes. And I guess I scored well enough for the intelligence field. And so one of the recruiters said, "Well, why don't you be a linguist?" And I'd never taken a language before. So 18 years old, I joined as a Russian linguist, and but so the thing is, any military kid knows this. You do not join the military unless you have a guaranteed school, because otherwise you are at their mercy and they can do whatever they want with you. So when you join, you go through boot camp, and then you go to your school. And I was immersed in Russian for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 47 weeks. And that was just the one part of school. And there was another section after, like 4 more months. But if I had flunked out of that, then I'd be chipping paint, I'd be peeling potatoes. They can do anything they want with you, whatever they need. It's true. I mean, it's true. And so I joined as a Russian linguist and had no idea, and I was, they would say, "Oh my God, you're gonna have to study 4 or 5 hours a night. There's a 50% attrition rate." And I don't know, took to it like a duck to water. It was no problem. I think it's the artist and the visual. To me, Russian was a very organized language, and it made sense to me. And I could just see the words, and I couldn't think of a word. I would remember seeing it in my textbook, and then I would go, "Oh, okay," I could read it in my mind and answer. So
that's so
yeah,
cool.
my girlfriend.
And how long did you do that? How long did you do that?
7 weeks. That was in Monterey, California. A beautiful place to be stationed, by the way. It's gorgeous.
So you're in the Navy doing this as a career for how long?
I ended up doing 6 years. The typical enlistment is 4 years, but because my school was basically a year and a half, they wanted you to have it wasn't mandatory, but they offered a bonus if you extended for 2 years. So that's what I did. So I was in for 6 years total. That was the perfect time, perfect amount of time, because by then I was ready to get out.
And from there, you started working at Johns Hopkins, right? And what did you do there?
I did administrative work. I was a contractor there at the Applied Physics Laboratory because the one great thing is I had a very high clearance. So I was very marketable in the DC area. Data processing, hated it to the depths of my soul. I hate it. But they had a really good education program. So that's when they started. I had gotten some college credits while I was in the Navy. And then I just started going to college part-time or working full-time. And I did that for a total of 7 years. It took forever. And then a position opened up for a graphic artist at Hopkins. And I applied and I got it. And it was just a transition. So when I was, doing the data processing, so I heard about an opening, and that's how I transitioned. It's like all of a sudden I was a graphic artist, and I loved it.
So you're working as a graphic artist, and what kind of graphic art were you doing for the hospital or the school?
Since this is for the Applied Physics Laboratory, which is ironic because I hated physics in high school, but so they were they called them Beltway bandits, but all the contractors that worked for the military for Washington D.C. I mean, they're based. Hopkins is based in Maryland, but you would have, I worked in the submarine technology department. So some of them would be, scenarios of, here are, planes flying and they're shooting this radar and sonar or whatever. It's very technical. And all I had to do was illustrate it. So we're using 3D software and Photoshop to basically do the artist depiction of technology that they wanted to get funding for. That was part of it. It might be doing an illustration of something that somebody was inventing, and it wasn't even actually all military, because in the submarine technology they were using that technology for medical, for heart problems. I won't be able to speak intelligently about it because I'm my
no, but
my brother-in-law's.
It's cool though, because a lot of people don't think about all those different things that go into college programs and things, that there's artists that are helping out with that. And that's really cool. So how did you hear about this job that came up at the FBI, and what was it posted as?
It was posted as an illustrator. So it was, they have what they call GS levels in the federal government. So this was a GS 10, which is a good kind of rank. And it was an illustrator. I was actually, I loved my job at Hopkins. I loved everybody I worked with, but I just happened to be at the Dunkin' Donuts looking through a Washington Post that somebody had left on the table. And I flipped up in the classifieds, and I saw an FBI seal, and I was like, what's that? And then I read it, and I was just like, oh my God. And this sounds so cool. And there was nothing in that, because it was a junior position. Nothing about skulls or anything then, but it was doing demonstrative evidence for courtroom trials, things like that, and composite sketches that you could work your way into if you got promoted. So I didn't think I would get it. I thought there's going to be hundreds of people applying for this. I don't have a chance, but maybe I'll get to see the inside of the FBI, because they'll have to interview me, because literally they wanted, and this, actually, I want to remember this for later in the conversation, but they wanted you able to draw with pencil, no computers, no 3D software, no design software. My degree was in design. So they wanted everything. And at Hopkins, I did all that. I did design, I did 3D illustrations and stuff. So I applied, and this was before this was 1997. So I mailed in my resume, paper. I sent it FedEx because I was terrified it would get lost. And I heard nothing for 6 months or something. And I thought, I thought they filled it. Everybody asked, my sister would ask me, I was like, I guess somebody else got it. And then one day I was working on a rush job and I got a phone call and somebody said, I'm from the FBI, and my heart stopped. And he said, we've got your application. We'd like to interview you. So
Oh my God, how exciting.
I flipped. So we said, it's down to you and 3 other people. And I had a phone interview a couple of days later. I thought that was the preliminary interview. It wasn't, it was the interview. So a couple of days after the phone interview, he called me back at work and he said, the job's yours if you want it. And I nearly lost my mind. I nearly lost my mind. Yeah, that was.
So from the time you sent in your resume until the time you got the job, how long was that?
It was an unusual situation. It was 3 years. And so it was during, I applied in 97. So they were trying to get me in before a rumored hiring freeze and, September 30th, end of the fiscal year. So September 30th, yes, hiring freeze. Congress couldn't decide on a budget, so all hiring is stopped. So then for 2 years, I'm sitting around going, somebody approved the budget. And this was during the Bush and Gore presidential thing, and nothing could get figured out. So,
oh God.
So yeah. It was finally it was September 2001. I remember the day. It was a Friday. And the agent came into the office and said, everything's done. Welcome to the FBI. But I didn't start till 2 months later.
So you get hired in September of 2001. And then what happens 4 days after you get hired?
I still wasn't in yet. I was hired. I had the offer letter. I had everything. But there was still, the wheels of the government move slowly. So, of course, when 9/11 happened, I thought I was desperate to get in there because the artists there were working 12-hour shifts. They were just working around the clock. And it still took some time. So I wasn't able to actually physically walk in the door until November, until 2 months later. But still, they were back to a normal schedule. And I was still working on everything for, a lot of things for 9/11. So there was that.
So what kind of things would a person in your position do as it relates to 9/11?
Okay, what did we do? Oh, so we scanned, all of the victim photos. You would think that there would be a nice, beautiful digital copy somewhere, but again, it was 2001. Not everybody had all that stuff. So we were scanning, cleaning up photos of all the victims. We were making presentations for Director Mueller and for the White House. We were doing interactive presentations. Like one of the ones there was a lead artist because I was brand new, but some of the senior artists would be doing, layouts, diagrams of the planes and where every person was sitting. And there would be a link to the voice calls, like some of the phone calls from people. It was, trust me, it was something to walk into. And actually, not a coworker, but a scientist that had worked at Hopkins was actually killed during that. I found that out the day after. So when I was at the Bureau, it was just very surreal. It's like I'm scanning pictures and then there's a picture of the person that I knew. I know many people after 9/11, they wanted to do something. What can I do? And at least I felt well, I'm here, I'm doing something. Helping with the presentations because they were going, the prosecuting Zacharias Moussaoui. So I worked on some of those, the presentations, the courtroom things. So it was anything related to 9/11 that took up the bulk of my time the first year.
What are some things when you started working there that a regular person would kind of be surprised by? Because obviously you walked in there and you didn't really know much. You just applied for some job in the newspaper and you're like, cool, I'll be doing some kind of art for the FBI. And you walk in after one of the biggest investigations in United States history. What happened? What are some things that kind of blew your mind that you didn't really realize happened behind the scenes?
It was on some... Well, my supervisor was walking me through the office and he said, this is where we keep all the skulls. And I was like, you have skulls in there? That was not in the job description, which was fine. But that kind of blew me away. Just seeing the real work, you've seen things on TV, you're watching police shows and everything, and then going inside the FBI and going, oh my God, this is real, where it really happens, and seeing people working in, scraping clothing for hairs and fibers and things like that. It was surreal, is all I can say. It was surreal to be there because everybody's normal people. They're just walking around like, this is their job. But to be on the inside, it was surreal. Like I kept pinching myself. I was like, I can't believe I'm here. It was thrilled. I was absolutely thrilled.
Do they have like one central office, or are there other branches throughout the country that do this work as well, or is it one place
Okay, so
like that?
the way the FBI is organized, there's the FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., and then they have field offices. So every state has most every state has a field office. So you could say that most of the casework is done by the agents in the field offices. So even though the FBI headquarters is in Washington, D.C., there's also WFO, the Washington field office. So, and then they have legal attaches all over the world. So but the forensic art, our division was the FBI laboratory. So you can imagine the organizational tree of the FBI goes on forever. So I was part of the FBI laboratory division, and we eventually moved down to Quantico. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. So when you started, they knew that you had some kind of a background in art, but you weren't specifically trained to do what you ended up doing. So when you started working there, did they require you to go to art school, or did someone teach you like on the job training, or was it a combination of
It
both
was
of
a
those
little
things?
combination. I mean, I submitted the portfolio, so they saw my drawing ability and all that. It was basically learning how to apply those skills to forensics. So I had done plenty of floor plans and diagrams and things at Hopkins, but this, you had to think of it as it going to a courtroom. And so how to make sure that this information is presented in a way that the jury can understand. So it's clear and unbiased. So I would sometimes shadow another artist, just they would be working on a case and I would see what they were doing. Then also they had, the big thing was the FBI forensic facial imaging class. And that was 3 weeks long. And that was training in composite drawings and age progressions and facial approximation. So that was my first time. That's when I fell in love with sculpts and facial approximation, was during that class. I thought, this is the best thing ever. And because I was still a new hire, I wasn't able to do facial approximation right away. I mean, you have to kind of, work up to that. But that's when I fell in love with it. And from then on, I was just, I did everything I could to learn everything about facial approximation because I wanted to do it later when I got promoted.
Isn't it kind of cool when you look back at your childhood and you said that you did see an episode of Quincy and you saw them doing that if the internet maybe existed, because think about this, if you were a 14-year-old kid and you saw a TV show that did that, all you'd have to do on Google is, what job can I get where I do this? And it'll pop up. But the same thing happened with me. There was no internet when I was trying to figure out what I was doing with my life either. So it's like kind of cool how people got their story without having that at their fingertips and got to where they were. When you started working at the FBI over 20 years ago, were you one of the only women working there, or what? Or do you think that there was a lot of women working there at the time, or has that changed over the course of 20 years?
As far as the FBI overall, it depends between agents and support personnel. So I was a support personnel. So in the graphic unit where I worked, and that is not the official name. I'm not giving official names of FBI units, just for anybody who's worried about it. So in the graphic unit, they're about 50-50 men and women. And our official title was Visual Information Specialist. But not everybody in there would do composites or age progressions or facial approximations. Some did more crime scene, like going out diagramming crime scenes, doing video. more of the technical aspect than others. So every artist in there had kind of their specialty. We had to be able to do everything at least at a base level, but then people kind of fall into what they're best at. And thankfully the supervisors then, they saw that and they're like, okay, well, Lisa loves sculpts and she's putting in the work, so that's the direction I went. Others just had very amazingly technical minds and were able, like, especially on the, for the Masawi trial, some of the presentations they did were just remarkable. Things that maybe with the software now might be a tad easier, but in 2001, it's incredible what they did.
I think it's cool that you're talking about trials that we're all familiar with hearing in the news and everything. Working in the hospital, we have to comply with HIPAA regulations, which is to protect patient privacy. Is there something similar in the FBI where you're allowed to talk about stuff, but you really can't talk about too much, so you can't figure out exactly who you're talking about?
Yes, I mean, we have the highest level of clearance, so top secret. I had what's called top secret with the SCI, special compartmented, so it was kind of up there. But because I'd been in the military, the FBI is not like the military, but it was the same thing. It's like, you're working in law enforcement, you have a clearance, you keep your mouth shut. That was just, security was drilled into our heads all the time. It's like, keep your mouth shut. So you don't go out and talk about work out in a bar or something. You just don't do it. And, they didn't have a rule against identifying yourself as an FBI employee online. But I never did. I mean, some people would go, I'm an FBI forensic artist, and have it all over their social media. And I never did that. I'm hardly on social media now, and I never put that I was at the FBI. I just, why bring attention? I didn't see anything.
Yeah, exactly.
What good can come of this? So yeah, I did.
So you said that they've picked up that you specialized in skulls. So just I want to know, like, what's your work schedule? Do you go to work just 9 to 5 Monday through Friday? Is it part-time? Are you on call? And then secondly, I want to know, when you walk into work every day, and this might change from day to day, but like, what do you sit down and do? Do you sit at a desk? Do you stand in a lab? Like, give us some explanation of what a typical work day would be for you.
So I would say that, the first half of my career, it's basically 9 to 5. You can slide the schedule a little bit, like 6 to 3:30. You can slide that a bit. But it's very disappointing for anybody that sees all the awesome sets, like on CSI and Bones. We do not work in cool offices. They're cubicles. The furniture's old. That's just what it's like. So my career can basically be divided into 2 9-year blocks. The 2 blocks. So the first half, you walk in, you sign in, you get coffee, you check your email. And that was before I was working on skulls. And the supervisor has a number of cases assigned to you, and you just sort of juggle them based on court dates. And then the prosecutor might call up and say, guess what? We're going to court a month early, and then you have to swap things around. So sometimes you're juggling. We were not on call. On-call employees, I don't know a lot about this, but, there would be a schedule. So you knew when you were on call. And I guess there was a different pay structure or something. I'm not too familiar with it, but I know it exists. But you were expected, if there was, you didn't want to say no. If the FBI says, we really need you to get on a plane tonight and go somewhere, you're like, okay, I will. So you're not technically on call, but yes, it's just like the military. I was used to that. I mean, the military owns you 24/7. You might work a 5-day week and get a weekend, but if you get a phone call that you need to go somewhere, then you go somewhere. Like, I don't know if you remember, it was all the shootings on the East Coast with, not can remember his name, the sniper shootings. If you remember that vaguely, it was huge in DC.
It's funny because I was just talking about that today. Actually, it's so funny how you don't talk about things for years, and then today I was just talking to my husband this morning about the DC sniper and stuff. and now you're talking about it, which is interesting. So what what involvement did you have with
Boy.
that case?
The first night I was called and said somebody saw something. There's a presentation in the morning. You have to go into work, and so it's 10 o'clock at night, and I'm driving to headquarters. Or I remember it was like some information came in. You need to do a presentation. You need to whatever. So that was for anybody that worked in the DC area. It was scary because at that time. I took the bus into DC. So you're standing in a long bus line and all you can think of is like, I'm a perfect target because this guy's still on the loose. Turns out it was two, but it was scary. It was like, oh my God, I joined the FBI and now there's, snipers and everything. So,
my husband, what my husband and I were talking about this morning actually was what a crazy time period that was, because it was like 9/11 happened, and then didn't the sniper thing happen at the same time as Hurricane Katrina? I feel like it was like all within a couple months of each other.
Might have been.
Like just craziness, and you're just like,
and
what
then
is
anthrax,
going on in the world
and then
right
anthrax.
now? Yeah. Oh, and anthrax too, of course. Yeah, that was just like a crazy
so
time.
Things like that, like, even with those anthrax letters, we might get those in and scan them, and they would be in part of a presentation we would give. One fun thing I got to do I shouldn't call it fun, but it was kind of cool. So during the trial for the sniper shooting, the model unit, they took, because, they would hide in the trunk and they drilled the hole and they were shooting people. They were inside the trunk and then shooting with the rifle out. So, the model shop got a car, cut it in half, and they restructured that to use in court so they could show exactly how they would climb into the trunk. And then a coworker and I, he was the lead artist. We went over to the driving training that they have for agents, where they get to drive fast and chase bad guys. And so we were having to measure one of the identical cars to use that for the courtroom exhibits. So that was, I got to work on that a little bit. It was interesting.
Yeah, that's us. I know it doesn't, it sounds kind of weird to say it's cool, but scientifically, and just to be involved with a case like that, I think it's okay to say that it's cool.
Yeah.
I think it's cool.
Actually, I'd completely forgotten about that. I just completely forgotten. It's like, oh yeah, I diagrammed that car. It's sometimes I forget some of the things I've done, and I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah. And you're like, I've done all this cool stuff, and it's every day of your life, right? So when you say composite sketch and all these words, that's like, could you explain what some of those things are, what you would actually do sitting there as an artist to come up with that stuff? Like, how do you do a composite sketch? Do you have to interview people to get that information?
Yes.
So you personally would interview them?
It was
okay.
And 50 years ago, it was different. The FBI agents would do the interview. That's a whole other story. But yes, we would go in. We would have a book of facial references. So we interview the person, but you're just basically trying to talk to them and get them to relax. We're not in any uniform, so you're just a regular person. Which somebody's been through something horrible. I mean, I did a few sexual assault cases, and it was very hard for me. I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to say anything wrong. And this person's just had the worst moment of their life, So it's not like a police interview.
Yeah, and you don't want them to be visualizing it, right? Like, you feel bad, but you're trying to help them. You have to look at it that way.
Exactly. It's like they're trying to forget that face. On one hand, they want to forget it. On the other hand, they want a representation of it so they can go, see, this is what that SOV looks like. Now go get them. I mean, it was... I don't want to get ahead of myself. So we would just a free recollection, like tell me what you remember. And it wasn't always just facial features. Sometimes it could be, something they smelled or anything, because it can all tie together. And then we have facial references. So let's say they said I can't speak. Let's say the witness describes he had a really long face and a big nose and big bushy eyebrows. By the way, that would be a wonderful composite to do, because average looking people are the worst to try to draw. If somebody says,
You're right.
well, it's like, then you feel like you're ending up drawing Charlie Brown because everything is just so nothing. So they said he had a really long face. We had a catalog of, there were the rest photos that had been organized. So then there's, head shape and then what was most similar. And it's a composite because you're piecing it together. Somebody called it once like Mr. Potato Head, which is, forensic artists hate that, but there is a little bit of truth into it that you're basically piecing things together. So we develop a general sketch, just keeping it rough, and then show it to them. And is this on the right track? Would you recognize this person? Like, what do we need to do? So then it's constant erasing and moving, and the eyes need to be closer together. And it's it takes like 2 to 3 hours generally. And when I started, we were doing a pencil and paper. I don't know if they still are, but obviously now with, digital pads and everything, just my opinion, that is the way to go. Like, there's no reason, I don't think, to be using pencil and paper in a situation like that when you could much more easily draw it on a pad. And then instead of having to erase an eye and move it half an inch, you just scoot it up with the cursor or move the layer a little bit. That's my opinion. Unpopular in some corners.
Yeah, and plus you could probably, easily show it on a screen better and everything like that. How often when you do these kind of drawings, do you ever get to see the person that gets arrested? Are you ever like, damn, I did a good job? Like they look exactly like the drawing. Does that happen often or not really?
It's kind of a crapshoot. And in those instances, you really have to say, and this is not like, being humble, but the witness is the most important person. There's like a train of thought in forensic art that you could have a fabulous artist and a bad witness and a great witness and a bad artist, and the bad artist will produce a better drawing. Because if you have a great witness, the quality of the drawing is important as the features that are being described. So sometimes like an artist who could do portrait level work is a terrible listener and is not paying attention to what the witness wants. And they make a beautiful drawing, but it doesn't look like what was in the witness's head. And that does nobody any good. So having a good witness is golden. If a witness says, I don't remember his nose, I don't remember, it was average, that's like pulling teeth. And it's hard for everybody.
Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by The Gross Room. Starting on February 9th to February 23rd, The Gross Room will be on sale for only $20 for the entire year of Gross. You will have access to celebrity death dissections, high-profile death dissections, thousands of videos, photos, articles, all the way dating back to 2019. You definitely need to join this Valentine's Day. Please go to thegrossroom.com for more info and sign up. So when you're off work, like I know, for example, for me, it just happened to me a couple weeks ago. I'm just sitting there with one of my friends and I notice pathology on people all the time. And it's hard for me to like shut that off. I feel bad about it because I just can't shut it off. If I notice someone has like a weird bump or something's going on with them, I can't shut it off. So the fact that you look at skulls for a living, right? Do you just kind of dissect every single person you look at and think about like what their skull looks like?
Yes. In a word, yes. It's a joke between me and my husband that we'd be sitting there talking and he would notice that my gaze was off. And he would say, you're looking at my skull, aren't you? And I was like, yes, I'm sorry, but just trying to figure things out, trying to figure out like, okay, there's this feature, how would it translate in flesh? And the funniest thing is to get a group of forensic artists together. One time there was a group of us at a conference and our waiter just had the most unusually shaped face. And we were all just like, it's like, stop staring. Because we were curious. That it's one of those things because it's a fascination. Like, how does the skull translate to the face? What causes that? It's like a puzzle. And so that just kind of appealed to me.
It's really cool though, because I don't know if you've ever been to the Mutter Museum in Philly, but they have a whole wall of skulls, and you just look at them and you're like, oh my God, this really could show that how people look so different. But I think when you're a regular person and you just see a skull like on TV or whatever, you don't really realize how many differences there are just with the size and with the orbits and everything, and how it changes between cultures. Is that something that you had to learn too about? Is this person from European descent or Asian descent, like things like that?
Well, the anthropologists would do that because they have, an artist has nowhere near the training that would take to be able to determine things like that. So the anthropologist sees it one way. They see it, of course, in the scientific way. They will say, the height, sex, age, stature, ancestry. As an artist, when I first started, I thought skulls looked alike. And of course, as soon as you see two skulls together, you're like, oh my God, I couldn't have been more wrong. And the first time I went to the body farm, we saw 20 all in a row. And I almost was like a kid in a candy store. And I've been to the Mutter, and it was just fascinating. And yes, you're standing there going, okay, I'm putting a face on in my head. But yeah, that's the key to why we look the way we do. Is it all starts with the skull, and people think, oh, how can they do that? Like, you're just making things up. And it's like, no, there's a lot of information from just your skull. There's some things that, are more left up to artistic interpretation. Well, I would say that. You have to downplay what you don't know and play it when you do know. So if the anthropologist says, this person broke their nose and it didn't heal right and it was really crooked, so really emphasize that. Or I could just look at the skull and know it's like, well, they have close set eyes, far apart eyes. So it's the overall look of the face. It's the head shape, where the features are. See, we don't know everything. We don't know a lot of things with a facial approximation, but we know where the features are. We can determine some things like the shape of the nose, the length, things like that. And you can never I've had some that were like scary close, that were really like, wow, the anthropologist and I were very happy with. But you can't get perfection, and that's actually not necessary, because in a facial approximation, you're looking for recognition from somebody, a family member, that is looking for that person. You could do a facial approximation, it's going to look like 50 people. It could be 50 different people. But if a family member is looking for their missing brother and they see that sculpture, they could key on it and go, okay, that looks like my brother, or that's familiar. That's what we're going for.
It's just so interesting to me. I'm reading a book with my daughter right now, a National Geographic book about mummies.
Oh, okay.
And they're talking about how they found this one on Mount Everest. I think he was labeled the Iceman or something. But they were showing how they took his skull and they recreated it to what he would look like. And, my daughter's 10, so she was just like, well, how did they know? And it was cool. I think in the book they said that you couldn't really tell from the nose and the ears maybe what they would look like, but they knew the guy was from European descent, and they were able to do what is it called, the facial approximations or whatever, based on that, like how thick this soft tissue would be in certain areas of the face and stuff.
Yeah. So we generally we have tissue depth tables just as a guideline. Ears are just, we know where they are, but they don't really. They're not important for identification, because if somebody had big ears, you're not going to know that from the skull. Things like the nose, as long as the nose is fairly intact, we can tell a lot about it. We could tell if somebody has a long, crooked nose that points up and goes to the left. The problem is, in the forensic world, is that a lot of them are homicides. So if they were shot in the face or beat up, or the skull has been out in the elements for how many years, little tiny bones get eaten up. So the nasal spine, which is one of the features that we look at to determine the position of the nose, the direction up or down or average, that is, I would say 9 times out of 10, that was gone by the time it got to me, because skull had been out there 5-10 years, and a squirrel chewed it off or something, or it had been, the person had been, due to trauma or something. So the skulls that forensic artists get are, they've been through a lot. they've been through a lot by that nature.
Yeah, they're not like textbook skulls.
Yeah. So, so that was part of the reason why I went to the body farm, not to jump ahead, but that was part of the reasons to try to learn more about what this nose looks like, the nasal aperture, and then how might that look in life. And so that's the difference between the forensic ones and the historical ones. Sometimes the historical ones aren't in great shape either, but you're not looking for an ID, so it's not like there's anything on the line. It's not because there's no, it's not a high stakes thing, and
it's just cool to see what the guy might have looked like, but it's
fascinating. It's
Let's get on to talking about, so your book, it comes out today, which it's awesome. I read it and so did my daughter. We loved it.
Thank you.
What made you decide that you were going to write a book about this topic? Like, what is your book about? Is it about your life? Is it about a combination?
It's about my time in the FBI, and I can honestly say that I was never going to write a book. I was an artist. It was like, I'm not an author. I am not going to write a book. However, after what happened to me, it's sort of, somebody asked me to describe the book, and I said, well, it's kind of a cross between Bones and Aaron Brockovich because it's my career, but then it's, oh my God, the battles that you have to fight when there's discrimination and harassment and the crazy lengths that can go to.
So let's get into talking. Yeah, let's talk about that. So you had your career, you obviously have a strong passion for it, and you decided to create a website. What exactly did you do on this website? Was it to kind of teach others about forensic art?
Yeah, it was purely that. I'm going to make this point because I'm probably a forensic artist that I know is listening to this. I want to make it clear. So in the FBI, you need permission for pretty much everything. So I had permission to, you get permission to run a website. I chose to keep it anonymous because I didn't want to have FBI blared everywhere. I don't have that website up anymore, but it was called Ask a Forensic Artist because I was getting like phone calls and emails from people, I want to be a forensic artist. How do you do it? And there was no source out there. Just like when I was 12 or 13 and saw, there was no resource. So I wanted to create a resource for people who wanted to be a forensic artist to help them get in the field.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, that was my whole thing. So I still actually I could push a button and make the website live again, which I might do if I
You should.
Yeah. But it was everything. It was like, what training do I need? Do I need a degree? Where are the jobs? How do you get into it? It was purely educational. And I don't know. I'm the kind of person, if I find out something cool, I want to grab the first person I go, this is what I found out. I look, did you know what happens when the skull does this? It's just, I don't know. It's just kind of in my nature. I loved it so much that I just kind of wanted to share it. And like I said, literally, I would get phone calls and emails, people, not through me, but my name got associated with the FBI because sometimes they would have us do interviews and everything. And I was getting phone calls and emails like, how can I be a forensic artist at work? And I was like, I'm sorry, I can't sit here and tell you how to be a forensic artist. So that was part of it too, to put the information out there.
And what happened? So you have this website and it's awesome for people that want to learn about your profession. And what happened?
Oh, you mean the complaint?
So someone that was a former FBI employee complained about
No, she had taught, we would have guest instructors at the FBI Academy. So for the facial imaging course, they would have, FBI people teaching, but then also there would be guest instructors. So she had taught at the academy, and I got called into my boss's office one day, and she saw my website and she didn't like it, and she decided to write a complaint letter to somebody way up in the FBI, and I got called on the carpet. And I actually didn't get in trouble for that. I mean, I had to explain myself. I didn't feel like I was in trouble at the moment. It turns out I didn't know it was coming. And
but But you had permission to do
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden it was a problem.
It was, for me, it was, why is this person doing this? Because what did I ever do to her? And I am not doing anything wrong. And, you know, I just spoken to my super, like, they knew I had a website. I believe I still have the email in case it's like, this is not bad memory. So my supervisor sent me the email. So it was a complaint letter. I think this is unprofessional, da, 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 da. And then there was a PS, the blogger's an FBI employee. And it's like, well, I didn't have that on my website on purpose. And I guess that was supposed to be a zinger. I don't know. All I can say is, I mean, I was devastated. Because it was like, all I'm trying to do is, you know, educate about forensic art. I guess all I can say is there are, you know, some people, women who support other women and others who don't. And
I've had the same exact things happen to me, trust me.
Okay.
So I 100% understand. Yeah, actually, when my daughter read your book, she was like, this lady has your exact life. Like, she just said it was crazy. And because she had read it first, and she's just like, you just won't believe it. She just went through the same exact stuff that you go through, you know?
Yeah.
And it's always just, I think that people are jealous because they didn't have the idea first or something. I don't know, just haters, people that are bored. I don't know what it is, but there's people that will use all of their energy to try to destroy you. It's really crazy what people do.
It is. It's I don't understand. It's like, you know, the crabs in the barrel, you know, like it's, you know, trying to drag in a person down. It's like, I don't get it. I don't understand. And, you know, it's like, I'm no competition. It's like, but then people are like, well, you're at the FBI. It's like, well, she has an awesome career. Like, I don't get it. But, you know.
Did she somehow know that you were running the site? Because if you were anonymous on your site, like how would she know to say, oh, this person's an employee of the FBI if you never said that you were?
Oh my God, the fact that you asked this. Like I said, we were friends/acquaintances. Like, I had met her in person many times. She wrote to me and she said, oh, is this your website? I see this new, is Ask a Forensic Artist. Is that you? And I remember writing back, you sly fox, you figured it out, like thinking it was fun and games. Like, oh, you figured it out, it was me.
Oh my God.
And then literally like 2 days later, I got called into the office. And that is the hand to God what happened. And that's why I was like, damn it, she fooled, like, it's like, I didn't know it was you, but now you just confirmed it. So yeah, that was, yeah. And I'd had it anonymous.
What a weirdo.
Yeah, I was just, you know.
So after that, your work found out about it, things started getting bad for you.
Things were turning because there was a lot of transition during that time. So it was like in the summer of 2009, like everything. So there was reorganization, had new supervisors. And so it was kind of like the perfect storm of things. And my new supervisors, one in particular, just did not like forensic artists. And, you know, he was a photographer. He ran the photo group, and he had forensic artists up in his lap, and he didn't like it. And he was very open about the fact that he did not like having forensic artists in his unit. So he had an axe to grind, you know, and especially against me. I don't know. People ask me, it's like, why was he picking on you? And I said, maybe some redhead in his childhood like made him mad. I don't know. There's just some people that want to stay up Taylor Swift. Some people are just mean. But yeah, I was like, I had a target on my back, and that kind of guy, I think that gave him a foothold, because from the moment we were put in the unit, he was trying to get us out. I mean, that was common knowledge. He told us, he said, I don't want you in this. You know, there's myself and several other forensic artists. And because he had lost several photographers, there was like a swap of personnel. So he wanted his photographers back. He didn't want us. And that was just the first thing he could latch on to, like that letter to upper management. Because it didn't go to him. It went like several levels above him. And so then he got called into somebody's office, like, guess what this forensic artist did, even though I was doing nothing wrong. But
do you think there's a possibility that someone at the top was like, we need to get rid of her no matter what, this is not good, that because she's like willing to talk publicly about stuff?
No. I mean, the person, I knew the person that she sent it to. And actually, she would be surprised to know that I was on good terms with him. So he didn't have a problem with me. So people complain about the FBI all the time. Like in my book, I call my former supervisor Gary. If that had happened with Gary, he would have laughed his butt off and said, "Oh my God," and he would have laughed it off. He would have taken it like not seriously at all, because he had the same thing happen to him. When he was coming up and everything, like people, they try to bring you down. So Gary, the previous supervisor, never would have been an issue. It would have been like, because he knew her, he knew how she was. The new supervisor, because he wanted forensic artists out of the unit, that was kind of like the first little chip that he could try to get a toehold on. So it didn't do the trick as far as upper management, giving me the stink eye, but it did with my supervisor, because he thought he had something on me. It was also...
Yeah, there's always like some man troll that's trying to get... I had the same thing, just like the one female doctor at my work used to call them man child, like just trying to get rid of me, and felt so threatened by me, even though they were in a higher position than me. It just was so weird.
Yeah.
So when you were working there at the FBI, so a couple of months ago, I don't know if you heard my interview with Dr. Daniel Westcott, but he is a forensic anthropologist. Yeah, I love him. He was awesome. He's a forensic anthropologist and professor at the Body Farm at Texas State University, and he talked about the Body Farm. So I was interested to learn that you went there as part of your job as the FBI. So could you explain to us what you were doing there?
Yes. Because
this was all around the same time, correct?
Yes, actually, I went to two different body farms. So I went to the first body farm, the original at University of Tennessee. I went there 6 times. And so that was a research project that I started because like I said, I wanted to know, like, what does this nose look like in real life? And forensic artists, we didn't have any, proof. We didn't have a skull. In a perfect world, you would have a photo of a skull and a photo of the person in life. And then you go, oh, okay, like start drawing some correlations. And we didn't have that. So when I read Death Saker for like the second time, and when I found out that they had, I was going to donate my body. So this is how it started, is I saw that they were collecting, this is how it all began. I saw that on the application, they were asking for driver's license photos. And then it was like the cartoon light bulb over my head. And I was like, oh my God, they have photos and these are donors. So the FBI laboratory, being a laboratory, they do research. And so we were, this is my previous bosses, I wrote up a research project. Let's go to the body farm and get all the donors they have that have life photos, and we'll 3D scan them, and then we'll put together a reference collection for forensic artists. And so we went there 6 times.
That's so cool.
I just gave myself goosebumps. It was most rewarding. It was just like, oh my God. It was like, I'm starting to sound like a goofball right now, but it was so exciting. It was like we collected over 100 skulls. We had their skulls. We had their life photos. We had like the basic, we had their anthropological information. So, I started putting together, I wanted to put together a reference guide. And, that of course, obviously need to protect the privacy of the individuals, but because they had been donated and they donated themselves, it was allowed to be used for law enforcement and for research. So my goal with that was to put together, just like the composite catalog has facial references, my goal was to put together a catalog of skeletal references to have the skull and the face. That was my goal, which didn't pan out for, reasons that became clear later in the book. But that was my goal. So then forensic artists could say, this nose that I'm working on is similar, they could have some sort of guideline to look for. Everything else is pretty much anecdotal. And then after that project ended, there was another research project going on. And so it kind of intertwined with ours. So we went to the Texas Body Farm, and then we scanned a number of skulls there too. And I'm pretty sure I met Dr. Westcott. He has a really big beard now. I was there, trying to remember when I was there, easily 10 years ago. So I'm pretty sure that's
yeah, because I think he's been there for a while.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
yeah,
he was there.
it seems like he's been there. That's so cool.
Yeah.
It sounds like you were on the brink of, because a lot of people don't realize that when you're working with skulls, it's a face, and a face is considered an identifiable
Yes.
feature. So you would have to get permission, and the problem is that the person's dead.
Yes.
So you can't really get permission from them anymore.
Yeah.
But when they did give permission to donate their body towards these types of things, it sucks that you weren't able to follow through with that.
Yeah.
You were talking earlier about you guys used like a sketch pen, and you weren't, or pad and paper to sketch, and you were
Yes.
talking about technology that exists on with computers and things like that. I guess you could use like a program even on an iPad or something to do drawings at this point. But while you were there, because now, for example, even in this mummy book that I'm reading with my daughter, which is already probably dated at this point, a couple years old, they show that they use AI, and they're using scanning of skulls a lot and stuff, as opposed to using the typical clay to do a sculpture or to use drawings. Did you see any of that before you had left the FBI, that they were moving over to more advanced technology as far as using those identifying features rather than using the traditional art materials that you were used to?
Yeah, actually, I probably 6 months before I retired, I was going to transition to digital sculpting, because it was the way things progressed, that we always used to do 2D approximations in the FBI, and the 3D came along when the group got a scanner. So we had never done 3D. This is a point I need to make as far as working with clay and skulls, is you never put clay on the skull, because the skull is evidence. Never, never, never. So that's why we'd scan the skull, make a copy, and put, sculpt with clay on the replica. And then and we were doing that before there were like off the shelf 3D sculpting programs. There were 3D sculpting programs out there, but they cost $50,000. So that's why we did clay on replicas. And then as, I'm not going to be able to think of the name. I'm not going to be able to think of the name of the software, but now there are, even 5 years ago, off the shelf 3D sculpting software. So I had ordered a new computer. So I had a great big new souped up computer. I got the software in, and I was transitioning to sculpting digitally, which to me it's better. It's better all around. I mean, it would be faster. There's no need to print the skull. You can see through the flesh into the skull. So that's where I was going. And just as all that was coming together, forces made me decide to retire. I retired. Yeah, that's kind of explained in the book. It was just, I guess, to be like, long story short, it was, by then I was in a new unit with a fabulous supervisor, and things were really pretty great. And it was just, sometimes I never thought I would leave forensic art, but just after a while, it was like, some things you just can't, there's only so much stress you can put up with, because it was never.
I understand that 100%.
It was never gone. The threat was always back there. Like the threat, the not so veiled threat, was taking my clearance. And without a clearance, you're dead meat. You can't work anywhere, and you're dead. So when those storm clouds started, I was like, you know what? And then also, I had lost just less than a year before, my mom and my brother died within 2 months of each other. And that was like,
God,
that's fine. I mean, but, things like that, you start assessing your life, and you look around and you go, why am I doing this? Why am I putting up with this? And what else can I do? And, after something like that, you start thinking, and that's when that's when I was like, you know what? I was planning on retiring at 62. And when I was 58, it's like, I'm eligible. My husband and I were like, let's just do something completely and utterly different. And that's what we did. And we moved to Vegas.
He was probably, yeah. I was gonna say, like, he was probably, because when I was working at the hospital and they were giving me a hard time, there would be times that I would just come home and cry
Yes,
every day,
yes.
like over some bullshit, right? And my husband finally was just like, I can't have you like
Yes.
this
Yep.
anymore, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it sucks because when you love your job so much, and it's not that you don't love your job, you love your job. It's just the people are making it absolutely brutal to work there.
Yeah.
Well, so I have kind of like a juicy question for
okay.
you. When I interned at the Philly ME's office, I remember one day I was up in the offices and I saw these giant posters that were black and white, and it had this really disturbing looking child on it that was dead.
Yes.
Like, looked like he was around 5 years old.
Mhm.
And I was like, what is this? I said to the medical examiner that I was interning with, what the hell is this thing doing in the closet? And he was like, oh, that's the boy in the box case. And I didn't know anything about it. And when I learned about it, it was crazy. It was a very high profile case that happened in Philadelphia where a young boy was found dead in a box. And they recently have just figured out who the kid is, which is crazy. But I thought it was so cool that there was this old. It wasn't the actual boy in the box in the closet. It was just these posters that they had made up at the time that said, "Do you know who this is?" Because nobody knew who this kid was, and nobody had reported that a kid was missing. So, like, 5-year-olds don't just appear dead that nobody knows that they were missing, right?
Right.
And I thought that cool piece of Philadelphia forensic history was so cool that it was just in the closet there because the office was old. As you were saying with CSI and everything, there was a Philadelphia forensic show that was on at some point that was showing the medical examiner's office in Philadelphia, and it was all shiny and stainless steel. And I thought, like, the medical examiner's office, well, I think that they moved since then, but at the time it was very 70s wood paneling, just old building cubicles, all that fake wood stuff. But anyway, I thought it was really cool that there was this old Philadelphia forensic history there at the office. You said when you started working at the FBI, they said, "Oh, here's our room of skulls" or whatever. Were there some cases that were there that you were familiar with that you couldn't believe you were seeing the actual real evidence in front of your eyes that they still had there?
Yes. It was older cases. What was the book? Was it Jeffrey McDonald? He was a doctor and he was convicted of killing. This was like during the 60s or 70s, killing his wife and his kids. And he was a military doctor. Fatal Vision, that was the book. I remember reading Fatal Vision before I ever thought of being in the FBI. And then in the archives, there were just like these big, gray cabinets that had lots of casework, lots of exhibits from years before. So I saw, the crime scene photos from that Jeffrey McDonald case. And it was like, I'm glad they were black and white at that, now, within a few months, I was looking at a lot of gory things. But I remember seeing the trial work for the Jeffrey McDonald case. That was the first thing that stuck in my mind, was like, I know this one. So that was, and I kind of feel like an insider, like, ooh, I saw this. But, it's just kind of like the everyday work at the FBI. It's like, I worked on this. That's not like blasé or anything, but me, I was completely new and geeked out. Like, I'm going through this like it's a treasure trove. Like, just looking through all the files. And some of the other artists were like, why are you looking at that for? It's like, because it's really interesting. So it's.
Is it hard when you're sitting around, like, especially during the 9/11 time? It was horrible. I mean, I was in my early 20s, but I vividly remember everything that was going on at the time. Like, you're sitting around at a dinner party or something, and everybody knows you work there, and they're people are trying to talk about how do they figure out who the hijackers are? How do they figure out this? where are all these people that are missing and stuff?
Right.
People have questions. Is it hard for you to just keep that in, just because you're saying it was very emotional.
Yeah.
So, sometimes it feels better when you could talk about stuff when it upsets you, but you didn't really have anyone to talk to.
It was, yeah, I wouldn't ever, and I didn't want to talk about it like later. My husband and I weren't married at that point. So I would call him and, he noticed that I was down. It was just like, at that point, that was during, scanning all these photos and everything. But the photos we were scanning, they were all like birthday parties and graduations and all these happy events. And then, but you're knowing that this person is gone. So that was, you look at pictures of people smiling and happy and you go, oh, that's really nice. And then you remember why you're scanning the picture and this person is gone. So it was, so I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to talk about it later. It was like, I just tried to, and, some of the, I had to do some, child abduction, oh my God, some pedophile, those you have to, before that, like, normally we wouldn't do that. There's, like task force or a special team at the FBI and, at other agencies like at the National Center, Missing Exploited Children, that will look at these photos and then they try to sanitize them so they can, figure out, what motel this is based on the bedspread and the curtains and things like that. So, I did a few of those, not many. That was enough. So, I actually talked to, one of the FBI psychologists. She was a psychologist at the academy, and just in a discussion, not anything formal, said, okay, I'm going to have to look at these photos. I know they're coming in and I don't want to look at them, and how do I handle it? And, she's like, just trying to compartmentalize it. And I just had to kind of disassociate and go, it's pixels on the screen, like zooming way in, it would, that it's just all these little pixels and stuff, just trying to put it aside. And I'm very glad I only had to do a few of those. And actually, I found out just by chance that one little girl was recovered. Just one of the photos I worked on, and it's a huge team of people doing these things. It's not like, oh, I did this photo and she was found. But it was just, I was on a tour of the National Center, and this image comes up, and they said she was recovered. And I was like, oh, I know her. That's, one of the, how you had the boy in a box, and this was like, boots, or, she wore cowboy boots or something. So it was just, that was nice. It's like, okay, I had to see this, but then later, yes, there was a happy ending. She was found and she's safe and recovered.
So does that happen that when, I guess that's the question, like the follow through, because a lot of times I'll do an autopsy or something. Well, it's better now. When I was working at the hospital and I was so in depth, but sometimes I do like per diem autopsies, and I'll do it and then I submit the slides and everything, and then I really don't know. Like, I kind of think what I know, how the person died, but then I don't really ever hear the follow through of the case, which I hate. I love like a full circle thing. So do your bosses sit down with you and say like, hey, this case we've been working on was solved, or is that something like you heard on the news?
No, I mean, some of the things wouldn't make the news like we did. Usually the way I found out, and you didn't always find out. It would basically be if the agent, like if I went out and I remember I did some, some composite sketches, and then, the agent emailed me. It was like, we got him. And this was something that didn't make the news. It was a different thing. And I would have the capability, because the FBI has, the whole database, that, I could probably have gone in and looked up and found out. I mean, I could have called the agent after, because I worked with a lot of agents. I could have called the detective to go, hey, what happened? But I guess I didn't want to annoy him. I thought, I did my job. That was a tool for them to do their job. And then now they do their work. And I just was never comfortable with calling them back and going like, hey, what happened? Did it work? And, lots of times things did. And they might, sometimes they would call like really, or email like really ecstatic, like, oh my God, this is great. And sometimes you'd never hear. And then you'd find out later that, you'd find out, like, I would see things in the newspaper, like, a pedophile was arrested, and I was going, oh, I worked on that. And, this is funny. One time, my girlfriend, Liz, hi, Liz, she called me one time, and she said, oh, I just saw this one approximation, and this person was ID. And, did you work on that? And I was like, who, what? And she sent me the link, and I was like, oh. And I said, yeah, that is mine. My girlfriend found out she was ID before I did, and I worked at the FBI. Liz thought that was hysterical.
Oh my God.
She knew before I did. I should have probably kept track of, like, everything I did. And I kept good notes, and I kept good records and everything. But I don't know. I kind of was like, okay, I did the work, and I would put it aside and go on to the next thing.
I know. I always think about that too. I get so mad because people say, like, how many autopsies have you did? Did you do this? And I have a pretty good recollection of, like, what I've seen. But I really wish that, because sometimes just one will pop in my head and I'll be like, oh, I forgot I did that. Like, I wish I wrote down more,
Yeah.
It's just like, I feel like you would do that now, but it's just like back then you just go to work and do your thing, and you just, I try to just take in as much as I can in my memory, and that's it. But so I don't want to get into why exactly you left and everything, because we need to leave some stuff for your book. But since you did leave now and you're not doing that anymore, so are you still interested in the whole, like, true crime world? Do you listen to podcasts and TV shows or things like that, or are you kind of like, I'm over that part of my life and I'm just doing something else completely now?
For the most part, I'm over it, but I mean, I'm still interested in it. And the true crime things that I'm interested in, I just watched this one. You might have heard of it. They called him Mostly Harmless. It's about a hiker. It's on Netflix. It's a great documentary. But that was, a body that had been found in the woods, and the internet was trying to identify him. So I'm interested in things that are like the investigation part. I don't want to read about or see horrible murders like this is a joke between me and my husband, that the true crime stories I'll watch are more like the husband-wife killing each other sort of thing, rather than home invasions, because it's like, I know my husband's not going to kill me, so I'm safe there. So I know that sounds terrible, but I just...
No, it's not. It's
me out.
Yeah, it does to me too, because I would be like watching Forensic Files all the time. My husband's a firefighter and he doesn't sleep at home sometimes. And then I would be so freaking scared at night, because I would be like, oh my God, like, I saw this case last week and the guy broke in the house and he didn't even know who she was. Like, something that I could say, oh, that could happen to me.
Exactly.
And then I wouldn't sleep. I'd be up all night, like, scared to death. I had, even when my girls were younger, I would have them sleep in bed with me because I was so scared. and then I was like, I can't watch this stuff anymore. I just can't. I can't do it until he's retired. Maybe I'll start watching it again.
Yeah,
or something.
I can't either. I'm with you there. It's like I said, I know it sounds terrible. It's like, if it's a husband-wife thing, that's, that I can watch. But, the I'll Be Gone in the Dark. Like that just terrified me. The Golden State, is it the Golden State Killer, the one that they identified through the genetic genealogy?
Oh yeah,
and Michelle.
Yeah, that one's real. Yeah,
that was brutal.
I wonder if it's like, because for me and you, like, I've been at the medical examiner's office and I've seen people, like, with my own two eyes, multiple people that have been murdered. It's real for me, and the same with you. You've seen all these skulls with people that have been killed. I wonder if it makes it even more scarier for us, because it's not just, we're not some girl that works in the office and is watching this on TV and doesn't really know how horrible and gruesome it could be and how scary it is.
Right.
You know? There's that element of the realness. Maybe, I don't know.
What's really comical, this is funny, is that I've been to the body farm and I've seen horrible decomp and been right next to it, and that I can do because it's fascinating and it was interesting. But if there's this really bloody movie on TV, I can't watch it. Like torture. Like, I never watched Dempster, and I knew they were bad guys. He's only torturing bad guys. But some stuff just, it stays in my brain and I can't, I can't get it out of my brain. I don't want that in my brain. Like if I can tell you this real quick, at the FBI Academy, they had, in the behavioral science unit, the one basically for the Silence of the Lambs, that was that unit. So
oh, that's cool.
so they're literally like 3 or 4 floors, like the 3rd or 4th basement. They're really down there. So they had the psychologist I was telling you about. She had all drawings and notebooks of like Son of Sam, like all the drawings they did. So all these serial killers and all of their artwork. And she, it was like a once in a lifetime thing because these things are not open to the public. And so she had them all out and she's explaining things. And it's like, I can't have these drawings in my head because these men were drawing these things in prison, basically, reliving the murders that they had committed. And I don't want what was in their head in my head. I walked down the hallway. We had a class. It was one of our facial imaging classes, and they were fascinated. And I was like, I'm done. I don't want it in my head.
Yeah, I understand that
Yeah.
because I feel the same way about a lot of that. It's scary. Like when the guy killed the college students in Idaho.
Yes.
I don't know if you've heard of
Oh,
it.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure you've heard
Yep.
about that case. It's just like, I don't know, especially it freaked me out when it happened, but then when they released his photo and video of him being arrested, his face like scared the shit out of me. Like his eyes are so creepy, and it like shook me, I don't know these people. I don't know anything about it, but something about it, I just was like, especially because like you said, when it's a husband and wife, you could see they get in fights all the time and they kill each other in the passion. But when it's strangers and people
Yes.
don't know that they're being stalked and all this stuff, it's just so scary to me.
It's
All right, let's
utterly
talk about
terrifies
something
me.
a little bit more cheery.
Yes.
Let's talk about your personal life. So you talked about your husband a couple times. So at what point of your whole career and transition from Navy into FBI and John Hopkins too, when did you meet him? How'd you meet him? And when did you guys get married?
We met when I was waiting to go into the FBI. So it wasn't a sure thing that I was going. I'm sorry, let me start that over. We met when I was waiting to go in the FBI. I'm sorry, my brain. And we actually met in person at the lunch. And I was recently divorced, and so was he. And it was just like, just friends. Like, I don't want anything to do with men. I'm done. I've got my cat and I'm done. And, but we just started talking. It's like, this guy's really just wonderful. And we were friends. And then I just fell in love with the guy because he's amazing and he's wonderful. And he's going to be embarrassed at this, but I don't care. So he,
how's he feel about what does he do for a living?
He was and he's still doing it, videographer and producer. So he also worked for the federal government. So he was making kind of like news stories, things. They would have a news channel sort of about some of the work and events that these military agencies would do. And he would go out. One time, oh my God, he was on the back of an airplane. They had the back open and he was showing me video and he's like, why not a harness on? I was like, I'm so glad you didn't. He was like, it was so cool. I was flying in the back of this and it was open and all I had was a harness. And I'm like, thank you very much. But yeah, no. So yeah, it's like, I'm so glad you only showed me that. Only told me about it after. Yeah. So he's very creative.
What's he think? Yeah, so that's cool because my husband's also very creative. It's good to like live in a house because sometimes I have like outrageous ideas, and when you have an artist that's a husband too, then
Yes.
you can express those in your house or they understand that you say, oh, I completely hate this, I need to change it or whatever. How's he feel about you, like knowing that you're handling human skulls all day at work and stuff? I mean, he was just pretty cool with it, obviously.
Yeah, he was like, well, sometimes I would come home and say, "Oh my God, we got this one skull in her." Oh, this one thing, this decomp I saw, and he's like, I don't want to know. Like, I don't want to know. And I said, "No, it's really not bad. It's really not that gross." And he's like, "No, like, don't tell me." So it was funny. I can tell you this was funny. One time, somebody from we had one of the anthropologists from the body farm come and teach in our class, and she had to transport some skulls in, and she didn't want to leave them in her hotel overnight, so we had because we had an alarm. So she said, "Can I store them at your house?" I said, "Well, let me ask my husband." So I was like, "Sweetie, how did you feel about having some human skulls in the den?" And he was like, "Let me think about it." And then he was like, "Okay." And I said, "It won't freak you out." And he goes, "As long as you don't go like, and like scare me with a skull." And after he said it was just really like eye-opening. He said, that's just what you end up as. It wasn't spooky. It wasn't scary. It wasn't gross. It was just, you're just skulls in a box. That's what we all end up as, So yeah, he's had skulls in his den. So
it's like he probably has a bunch of like one-liners of what husband hears this question from their wife. Can we just store these 10 skulls in our house overnight? Can we put the alarm on? You don't care that there's like 10 dead people downstairs while we're sleeping, right?
Yeah, the cop
you can't be like that in this field thinking there's ghosts and stuff. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, what if you had like a reason, like I don't know, a fire or something in the middle of the night, and they show up? They'd be like, "What's happening here?"
I said, "I promise they were already dead."
Aside from. I know, right?
Yeah.
So we know that you're not doing the forensic art anymore, but I mean, you're an artist. So what are your other interests besides being interested in forensics? Like, do you garden? Do you draw? Do you still do art and stuff?
I am doing anything that's not a skull. So right now I'm actually, so don't tell my husband, no. I'm working on a painting right now, which is just new territory for me. I just jumped into a big project. And I'm not going to say exactly what it is because my husband's going to hear this, and like I want to be able to finish it. But I'm actually working on like a big thing. So anything that's I don't like creepy stuff. I mean, I like some things that are macabre. There's a level of creepiness that I really like, but it depends. It's like I have to see it. So I like humor and just like a little bit of creepiness. So it's hard to explain, but I like humor in art, and I like things that are surprising. So like, you might look at a painting and go, "Oh, that's a really nice painting." And then you look really close and there's like a cow lying in the background, like obscurely, just things that are silly or maybe a bit surreal, fun surrealism. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what I'm figuring it out. This is a time where I get to, I get frustrated because I'm like, I can't do this, I can't do that. And my husband's like, this is the time where you get to play and do whatever you want. And so just play and have fun. And so I'm like, okay. So after being so work oriented for so long, where you have a deadline, it has to be done, it has to be right. It's like, this is artwork. You're allowed to make mistakes. You're allowed to crumple up the paper and throw it away. So that's what I'm learning now.
Yeah, that it does seem like a weird transition to just turn it off from what you were doing.
It is.
Well, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Oh,
everyone needs to get your book. It's called Clay and Bones, and it's available now. Do you have, you are going to reactivate your website, I hope, because I bet you a lot of people listening to this today are interested.
I do have a website. It's for the author website. I actually did repost things. It's a forensic 101 about how to become a forensic artist. So I actually did put that on my current site, my author site. So I will put some things back up. That is the one thing I did put up because somebody wrote to me on Instagram and says they want to be a forensic artist. And she said, "Oh, back in high school, I asked some forensic artist and they wouldn't give me the time of the day." I was like, "Oh, I'm going to put that on my website." So I did. So, yeah.
Yeah, that kind of stuff makes me mad when people aren't willing to help the next generation of people.
My girlfriend here.
Do they have
sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, my girlfriend here, she puts it, she's like, women need to support women. It's just like, send the elevator back down. When you make it to the top, hit the bottom and like help somebody else on their way up, you know? And it's like, yeah, like I don't understand.
Exactly. I don't.
Differently.
Yeah, I don't either. It's really upsetting when I hear stuff like that. Do you think that there's college? I mean, I don't even know anything about this, but I feel like there must be some kind of college programs at this point that are geared towards people that want to do stuff like
For
that.
forensic art, there really isn't unless you create your own curriculum. And I only know of one artist so far who did that. And her name is escaping me because she's wonderful. But she went to the University of Tennessee. And so she created, because it's the body of art, she was able to create a forensic art program. And there's actually a forensic art master's program, and I think Dundee, Scotland or something, which I'm sure is a wonderful program. But because of the nature of forensic art, there's no, it's not like being a doctor or something where you need to have certain credentials and a piece of paper that you are now a forensic artist. That doesn't exist in forensic art. It's just one of those jobs that for most forensic artists work in law enforcement agencies like state, sheriff's office, city police, things like that. And they're mostly doing composites, and it's an adjunct. It's a collateral duty. So it would be forensic art is so niche. It would be just too narrow a pool for to have a college program in it, I believe. And there's just not the jobs.
That's something important to say too, because you were saying you only worked with a few people, right, that did your job?
Yeah, I mean, the full-time positions, and I believe this is in my post on my website, is that the full-time forensic artists, there are very few, maybe under 50, nobody really knows, not many. We work at the state and federal level. So those are like where the full-time forensic art positions are. The other forensic art positions, like I said, they're collateral duties. They're done by people in law enforcement, detectives, crime scene techs, whatever. A person in law enforcement who had artistic talent, and their boss said, hey, you can draw, you're going to be our forensic artist now. Or they had the gumption to say, I want to do composite sketches, and they create the job. There's no money in law enforcement. There's no money to hire forensic artists. So it's one of these collateral duties where somebody who is very motivated, this is usually where it happens, you have a motivated person in law enforcement who can draw that says, this is what I want to do, and they volunteer their services as needed. They're not paid extra. They do it because they love it.
That's really important to note, because because I feel like I'm an artist too, and a scientist too. I feel like I would be actually interested in that too, that kind of job, but people need to understand that you really have to kind of make it happen for yourself in a way. It's not as easy as just going to school to be a nurse, go to school, get a job, get hired.
Exactly.
Although they have to be good too, it's just in a different kind of way. And it's the same could be said, like every painter isn't going to be Picasso, right? Like
yeah.
It's just the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, it just pains me when, I hear people, they want to be a forensic artist, and, they're taking classes, like, there's lots of commercial classes out there. And it's like, well, that's great if you want to, learn about it and everything, but it's just, there's no jobs. There's very, very few jobs. And the vast majority of them are in law enforcement. I've got grief for this, but it's the truth, because skulls are evidence. A composite drawing is evidence. You're dealing with evidence. So it's only that's how it is. It is what it is. It's sorry. Yeah. So, but somebody that's motivated, somebody with artistic skill, they can be in academia, anything that might cross paths with law enforcement. You would have the potential to be able to do like a facial approximation. If you work at a university and you're in anatomy or anthropology, guess what? If you put forth the effort, you could probably do some facial approximations for the medical examiner. It's completely possible. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's great advice. Well, thank you so much again. It was awesome talking to you.
That was great talking to you. This is a thrill. This is great.